will the 49ers hold themselves accountable for this loss? And what I mean is, will they look at it and say, you know what? Injuries happen. We did have some bad luck. We might have won with Brock Purdy, but at the same time, we got beat in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Philly's better than us. We gotta get over the hump. We can't just be like, you know what? It's a one-game tournament. Stuff happens. It's a violent sport. Let's run it back. Let's just keep running it back and telling ourselves that we're as good as any team in the league, and eventually it'll break our way. Are the Niners going to take that approach for the fourth year in a row, or is someone in the organization going to say, we got to get over the hump, we got to do something a little drastic this offseason? What do you think?
Well, I'm concerned that they won't. I hope they do. I'm concerned that they won't. I think, on the bright side, the 49ers have a good nucleus of players that if they can re-sign those guys, they'll be fine. If they upgrade a few positions, one of them being right tackle, shout out to Mike McGlinchey, nice guy. I don't want him back on the team next year. They need to upgrade the right tackle position. Looks like Jake Brendel's going to be gone at the center position. They need to address that somehow. And I don't know if the rookie approach or the sophomore approach is going to be the right one in that regard. So offensive line has to be something that they look at and hold themselves accountable to improving. John Lynch had a press conference in regards to the offensive line, and where they're at with their offensive line is exactly what they planned. They need a new plan this year in regards to that. The problem is when you look back, you don't see a lot of accountability, at least to the public. Now, they may have accountability within the building and when they talk to themselves about what they need to do and the mistakes they made, but you don't see it displayed publicly in press conferences from Kyle Shanahan and people like that. I mean, he blamed the Brock Purdy injury on Croft and Purdy. Croft for not making the block, Purdy for not stepping up in the pocket. And when you watch that play on replay, I watched it several times, there really wasn't time for him to step up in the pocket. There wasn't time for him to do that. So it's just like a kind of a disturbing trend that we see where accountability doesn't seem to be on the forefront, at least publicly, for the 49ers.
And I think Kyle Shanahan sets this tone. I mean, we've talked about, is he improving? Is he maturing? Maybe, but I think his ego prevents him from taking accountability, which prevents him from growing. And so, like in the Super Bowl, the Niners, he keeps saying, like, they were the best team and they lost because Bosa got held. I don't know if he said those words, but that's kind of Bosa got held on 3rd and 15. That came down to one play, and essentially they cheated. So the Niners should have won the Super Bowl that year. Then last year, they lost because Tart dropped a gimme interception. But Kyle did his job. So he's now basically a 2-time champion. And then this year, he probably would have won again, but his quarterbacks got hurt, so you can't hold that against him either. And it's like, if that's the guy setting the tone for the entire organization, then who's going to be the guy that steps up and says, no, I'm going to take accountability for some of these mistakes on this team, for some of our failures.
Ultimately, Jed York is responsible for all of this, right? Below him, you have John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. So one of those three guys, hopefully all three take some accountability for this, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. I mean, the reason we're on Brock Purdy now, the reason we were on Josh Johnson after Brock Purdy went down is because of mistakes that were made with Trey Lance in the beginning of the season. If you don't run Trey Lance 13 times a game, we may not even see Brock Purdy. Now, maybe Brock Purdy is the better option over Trey Lance. That may be the case. I'm not saying it isn't. But the fact that Trey Lance was hurt in the first place is on Kyle Shanahan. That's why we're down to Jimmy. Then after Jimmy gets hurt, that's why we're down to Brock. And when Brock gets hurt because of scheme, which I think is ultimately the reason why that was a busted play, now we're down to Josh Johnson. And we shouldn't have even been there. And there needs to be some accountability, especially after seeing that video that came out on Friday with Kyle Shanahan in regards to the way you can safely and not safely use the quarterback. So that kind of had me irked going into this game. I'll be honest with you. And when I saw Brock Purdy go down, just very frustrating. The 49ers continue to have injuries at the quarterback position. And there's not a quarterback on that team that would be healthy running the ball 13 times a game. So this injury-prone stuff for all of them, I'm ready to throw that out the window. Even Jimmy, I don't know if he's injury-prone at this point because every single 49er quarterback is getting injured. It tends to be a trend, and it needs to be prioritized, in my opinion.
I feel like someone has to hold Kyle Shanahan accountable if he won't, because to me, like, he's a lot like Jimmy, in my opinion. Like, you could argue that Jimmy's good. People can argue that Kyle's good, but I feel like they've sort of displayed a ceiling, especially in the playoffs. Kyle Shanahan has some of the most remarkable losses in playoff history. And this one yesterday was maybe the most remarkable. I mean, that game was an embarrassment. They had to play an entire half handing the ball off. And Kyle's going to say it's not my fault, but I disagree. You don't protect your quarterbacks. And it all culminated in one of the most embarrassing playoff games I've ever seen. I've never seen an NFL game where the team couldn't actually put a quarterback on the field or throw the ball for a half. I've never seen that happen. In the NFC Championship, and it's because and not just that, the 4th and 3 that you didn't challenge. I mean, a big swing in that game was that play and the fact that like a series or two later, Nick Sirianni challenged 1-1. Like, dude, I'm sorry, man. These are crucial mistakes in the NFC Championship. And if Jimmy throws a picks in these big games, we crush him. But Kyle does stuff like this and we're like, well, that's football. No. To me, either Kyle is going to change and improve or he is the Jimmy Garoppolo of head coaches.
I mean, the 49ers came out and got smacked. Did they look prepared in any way? I don't think they look prepared in any way. And you can blame it on Brock Purdy getting injured, but why was the protection so bad? Why was that why did he not challenge that catch? That starts from Kyle Shanahan to all the coaches in the booth. It's just horrible game management. Yeah,
and we talked the last few weeks like, hey, the Niners really aren't playing championship football. Like this effort is good enough to beat the Raiders or the Seahawks, but it's not good enough to beat the best teams in the league. When they face Seattle, they're going to have to come out and be clicking right away and play 60 minutes of football. Well, they kept saying like, or intimating that we're going to turn it on. We're going to rise to the occasion. We can flip the switch. No, you can't. There is no switch. You either find that high level of football before the playoff start or you don't. And the Eagles have. The Niners haven't been playing their best football for over a month. And this is what freaking happens when you go up against it. And they also were saying stuff like, we don't want a bye week. We want to keep it going. Like, oh, you don't want a bye week? Yeah, you do. You want a bye week. You want the home field advantage. You want the calls, all of that. Like, I can't believe how arrogant they sounded this earlier this year. Now it's like, hold on. Let's take it back. Next year, what you need to do is come out firing. You need to be ready to go from the beginning of the season because in 2019 you were. In the preseason. In 2019 you were, and you hosted the NFC Championship game and destroyed the Packers. I think it matters.
Yeah, using the season as a preseason is a direct result of why the 49ers lost. I mean, if this game is in Santa Clara, it may be a different story. When you're losing to the Bears and the Falcons and the Denver Broncos, it's going to come back and bite you. And 49ers have to start quicker moving forward.
Yeah, don't lose to terrible teams in September. Is that so much to ask? Mm-hmm. Denver was one of the worst teams in the league this year. Chicago too. How? You guys are way too good, way too well coached, and way too talented.